best bit about those movies, of course, was trying to get the pause button just right on the VHS as well.
Well, you did want to catch it so that there was jigging, still jigging. Well, maybe you did.
It's so much easier now because once you'd paused it, you couldn't just go back a frame or two. You had to rewind.
Yeah.
So I'm told.
You kept your hands free.
So
As a kid, it was amazing that you heard on the news in the morning at 7:45 that there's a space shuttle's blown up. And by the time you got into school, there was a joke going around about it.
Oh my God,
right?
yes.
And not only that, but then your dad would come back from work and he'd tell you that joke.
It's time to adjust those shoulder pads, backcomb what's left of your hair, and jump into the DeLorean for a look back at what's possibly the best decade anyone could ever have grown up in.
Shall we play a game?
This is Bring Back the 80s with your hosts James Alderson and me, Andy Jackson.
good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and thank you for watching.
Bye.
Here we are with another episode, James.
We're back, aren't we? What episode is this then, Andy?
I think this is number 11, but as we always say, if it's wrong, in the subtitles down there, that'll come up as the right.
Don't trust us.
But we think it's number 11.
Yeah.
Thank you, by the way, to everybody who's been subscribed and locked in at that. We're just we're getting pretty well at the moment.
Yeah, I think by the time this goes out, 500 subscribers.
I think so, which is not bad.
Over 500,000 views. And, we got 5 followers on OnlyFans. So that's the big one. That's the big one.
So they can't afford us, James. That's why. Right, one of the reasons I think that people are coming back week after week is because they are so mystified by the mystery sound.
No.
So mystified by the mystery sound. This was the one that we did last time around. Thank you for your guesses on this. Would you say that was almost too easy, James?
Too easy, because there's a little clue to the left of the telly, halfway up the frame.
I never noticed that. How funny.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, PacMan, obviously. That's, I believe, when you just press start, and that is the beginning, just as PacMan appears.
In the proper arcade version, the proper wooden arcade version that would be in the chip shop. Would you like to hazard a guess at what year that came out?
Tricky one. I mean, 83.
80.
Is it?
80.
Yeah.
First came out in 1980, but very early. Down the chip shop, waiting for your chips. Was it pound coins? Was it a pound ago?
No,
it wouldn't have been a pound, would it?
It would have been 10p.
10p, yeah.
When it first came out. And nobody ever said, put your headphones in, mate. They just let you play it in the corner of the chip shop.
It's like pubs and things were noisy as well, with all the fruit machines and stuff going on there.
Yeah, jukebox, everything kicking off, down to people's individual desires of whatever they wanted to put on.
Yeah.
But none of that. I don't want to listen to your nonsense when you were playing on the PacMan or something, but now we do it, don't we?
If there was a jukebox on as well, of course, everybody was hearing your choice.
Yeah.
But we get so wound up now when somebody's on the train and they're listening to some kind of old shit, and it's like, don't want to know what that is at all.
Angry.
Well done, Mikey, 1973, for guessing that PacMan arcade game from 1980.
Yes, he would have been 6 or 7, wouldn't he, when that came out? Bless him, old Mikey, 1973. Would have loved all that.
That's well worked out there, James. Well worked out. Let us do the brand new mystery sound for this one. Now, I don't know whether I've made this one too tricky. Here we go. We'll see.
Ooh, crikey.
Any ideas?
I got a few ideas, but I'd probably have to listen to it 45 times and annoy the wife at home over the next week to work it out.
I'm sure she'd be delighted when that's on loop, James.
Did you hear the latest that's been going on over the last 6 months on social media? Because there's been an 80s track that people have said they're familiar with, but they couldn't pinpoint, and it's been gone viral.
Yeah.
Where they've been saying, what is this music? What is this music? And people are like, I know what it is. What is it then? I go, I don't know, but it's really ringing a bell. And nobody could get it. And it was so 80s. It was obviously 80s. And it turns out, it's been revealed about 3 days ago, it's a guy who used to write music for porn films.
Fantastic.
So those people go, I've heard that so many times, love. I know it. Like, how do you know that? I don't know it.
Oh, that is brilliant,
It was
isn't
a
it?
very stereotypical 80s track.
That's fantastic.
And he used to just write, I mean, for me, it would be like 30-second segments, but they used to write like 5-minute segments of these 80s tracks for the, well, not 80s tracks, just tracks back in the day. And turns out it's for a soft porn movie of the 80s.
Oh,
so watch what you guess.
Best bit about those movies, of course, was trying to get the pause button just right on the VHS as well.
Well, you didn't want to catch it so that there was jigging, still jigging. Well, maybe you did.
It's so much easier now because you once you'd paused it, you couldn't just go back a frame or two. You had to rewind.
Yeah.
So I'm told.
If you had your hands free.
So, so that's our new mystery sound. If you know what it is, let us know in the comments. We'll do the winner in a couple of weeks or so.
Yeah.
But quite a tricky one. We'll give you a little repeat of that in our next instalment as well.
Thank you.
But love to hear from you as well. Now, when we put this sort of like weeks and weeks ago, I say James has done all the planning.
Yeah.
And you came up with today's theme. And then when we got to it, we thought, now this is going to be a tricky one because today's theme is
80s disasters. Now, I don't mean like Nakatomi Plaza and the top of Bruce Willis. Because the reason that it came up as a topic is I just think it was a weird decade. Because there were just an unprecedented amount of catastrophes in the 80s, right? And I was a kid in the 80s. So I remember almost weekly. You know, I mean, a space shuttle would blow up every third day, I think. Something was happening. And as a kid, it was amazing that you heard on the news in the morning at 7:45 that there's a space shuttle's blown up. And by the time you got into school, there was a joke going around about it.
Oh, my God,
right?
yes.
And not only that, but then your dad would come back from work and he'd tell you that joke. And he'd be like, there's no internet.
How did it happen? Yeah.
How is this happening? You know, the classic. And that's where I'm coming from, by the way, in this episode. So there's no malice involved or anything, but most of the people who are listening to this were probably young kids or teenagers in the 80s, and they remember this sort of era where there was no internet, there was no Twitter, there was no texting, there was nothing, word of mouth, and rumours got out about disasters, and the first thing on a kid's mind is there's something funny about this.
Yeah.
And it's the best way to relieve the stress and grief and problems of the world, I think. You know, the big one for me, I was probably about 10, and the space shuttle went up and it blew up. All the astronauts died, all 7 astronauts died, and the first joke that came out, I reckon it was within an hour of news going around the school, was, what does NASA stand for? Need another 7 astronauts, right? And it's awful, but it's just the way, it's just kids' mentality, and it still is today. Quite macabre, the kids who joke about things. You know, it's a lot of teasing, a lot of messing about, a lot of joking, but it is sometimes the way that you deal with things as humans.
And back then, there was no such thing as woke, there was no such thing as being offended, because nobody was ever offended by anything. So perhaps we should say, trigger warning, you might be offended by some of this, but if you are, you're not as old as us. So you should, perhaps this isn't the podcast for you.
I don't know. I mean, I think that kids aren't. This woke agenda is very much driven by the press. We've always been careful about what to say. You don't say the wrong thing. If you're just a decent person, you don't say the wrong thing. But, you know, when you're a child and when you're a kid, you joke about things that maybe you wouldn't do as a grown-up, although we're recalling those days now. But it's, you know, kids these days still mess about and joke about things that they maybe shouldn't.
I think probably far worse than we ever did. But the thing is, as well, when one of them says something, because it all goes across social media, and that is instant.
Yes.
And then, you know,
traceable.
It's actually happening now, isn't it? With people who are perhaps celebrities now, or who have celebrity status now, they might have said something sort of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, and somebody's found a clip of that and then posted that on social media. And whereas, you know, then it never occurred to us that what we might say, which might be of questionable taste but nevertheless amusing, would come back and get us cancelled later on in our career.
And it's all, and as we said, most of it was word of mouth. So when your dad came out from the pub and said that joke about the astronauts, there was no way to trace it back. There's no way to find out who said it. There's no way. Who is that dad? Who came up with that joke? Bloody funny, but he's getting sacked tomorrow.
How did it work though? Because you know, you come to mention it, you're right. You'd see it on the news at 8 o'clock in the morning. You'd hear it on the news. By the time you got to school, somebody would have the joke, and like
Yeah.
you say, you wouldn't be talking to your dad on, you wouldn't be texting each other.
This is a good one, Dad, yeah.
There was no text.
No.
But like you say, by the time you got home, it had somehow gone all around the world and across the generations, and then it comes back in the evening.
I always remember, and this isn't earth-shatteringly and groundbreaking wording, but Coolio had a track out in the very early 90s, Gangster's Paradise, and I'm sure you remember it. And I was just started saying, just off the bat, because I loved the track and I thought he was great, Coolio instead of cool or okay, when I was in my, probably in mid-teens. Coolio. So that weekend,
you were there.
I know, I was there. I was on the streets. That weekend, I went to see my cousin up in Bedfordshire, and he said Coolio, and it was like, what? Not that I'd come up with it. You just thought of it as well. But it's these different things you start to think, how maybe lots of people come up with the same joke. Maybe
could be.
There was one about was it Townsend Towson? The ferry
people?
Disaster?
Yeah.
That capsized or something happened, and that was to do with the roll on, roll off doors where you drive on and drive off and they hadn't shut properly, something. And there was a joke about this, what I don't remember the joke, which is typical me, but it was what's the similarity between the Townsend Towson ferry and a condom? They're both roll on, roll off or something. And it's like there was some joke
always about something,
that morning, that day, it was just brilliant. Weirdly,
there was the actress. There was an actress, Natalie Wood, who was drowned there was a boating accident or something. But people said, perhaps it was murder, perhaps it was whatever. Yeah. But that hit the headlines, and the very same day. So her name was Natalie Wood. The very same day was the joke was, what kind of wood doesn't float?
Right,
Natalie Wood.
Yeah.
So, and it was and that was all over the place. And again, trigger warning. I apologise. This is not us saying this now. Yeah. This is what we were saying as kids back.
It was an instant, sort of wildfire reaction to disasters. But going back to how this all started, there were loads. I mean, there were loads of disasters. Absolutely loads. You know
why?
Why?
No health and safety.
No health and safety. Well, that's it, yeah. But I mean, maybe they didn't shut the door on the shuttle, or they certainly didn't shut the door on Townsend Towson ferry. But Chernobyl, Ethiopian famine, the ozone.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big thing of the 80s.
Never hear anything about the ozone now.
Well, we fixed it.
We fixed it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because we stopped spraying the aerosols, didn't we?
Stopped Lynx Africa.
To roll on, and it's all good now.
Fixed it now. But that was the thing. Ozone. It was like, oh my God, don't spray that in here. We're going to be dead by Christmas. That was the catastrophe on the horizon, coming up fast. And I think that really we're the disasters of the 80s, because we have caused all the nightmare of the environment now, everything. So if we want to look at the biggest disaster of the 80s, it was probably
down to us. I've just realised, because climate change is the new ozone layer, isn't it? Yeah. That is the new thing. And I'm not by any second saying that climate change is not a real thing. But as maybe kids now would have the same kind of attitude to what we thought about the ozone layer. The ozone layer. Maybe that's their take on climate change now. I don't know.
I think it's just
Trump.
I think it did warm it up quite a bit. Gave it a bit of a kickstart, didn't it? In the 80s, the ozone. But unlike the ozone, I don't think where we are now is reversible.
We just need to fix it. There must be a way. Yeah, Trump will come up with a way of fixing it.
I think we should vote in. Yeah, definitely vote in Trump, and we keep in Rishi. And bring back Boris. Bring back Boris. Get Trump in, and let's fix this climate problem.
Put the three of them in a room together.
If Trump could come along, and maybe he could just bleach everything, and it would be all right then. We could just bleach the countryside, bleach the air.
That was his idea, wasn't it? That was to drink bleach to get over COVID.
Don't do that.
I remember watching that on TV, and they did a close-up of one of his advisors, who was a proper scientist, and it was just a look on her face.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Absolutely gobsmacked, wasn't she?
What has he said? Well, you did mention one of the disasters, and we are no means, by no means making light of any of these disasters, some of them of which were completely some of them were not our fault, some of them were just down to the weather.
Yes.
And sometimes in the face of adversity, something really good comes out. And you talked about the Ethiopian famine back in the 80s. I think they had 3 years, didn't they, of no crops, effectively.
Yeah, but it's turned out really that it was more, I mean, obviously that it was a particularly bad few years, definitely, but it was the first time that we, as sort of Brits really, became aware of any struggles like that. I think as a kid I'd never seen the photos and the images that we saw then, but it turns out that there's always famine going on somewhere in Africa, and we were never told about it, like a lot of history and a lot of things that have happened that we're now learning about. Oh, no, that wasn't us. No, it's a bit like when you hear about your son doing something bad. You go, no, that wasn't him. No. You tell the teacher, no, not us. And we're like that now, aren't we? One
of us, we had a huge empire, didn't we?
Yeah, lovely museums we've got, haven't we? With lots of lovely things from around the world.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. But yes, so we were hearing about this thanks to Bob Geldof, who's very wealthy now somehow. And he making all this money. Making all this money for the charity, of course, and
perhaps he rounded up.
He did, or down, yes, when he paid it in. But he, I don't know where that hat of coins has gone. That's weird. No, but he ran it all, so you know.
And out of that came one of the biggest, most spectacular events that anybody has ever seen. Yeah. At the time.
It's 12 noon in London, 7 a.m. in Philadelphia. And around the world, it's time for Live Aid. Wembley welcomes their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Another disaster of the 80s.
And gentlemen, the Royal
Bob Geldof.
Yeah. 48.
Standing.
And now, to start the 16 hours of Live Aid, would you welcome Status Quo?
Do we have to?
I don't think anybody realised just how big a thing it was going to be, did they?
No, and I've got it off the back of it. The second to that broadcast, of course, was the Portsmouth News's Live Aid edition, the Live Aid special, with this geezer
in colour as well.
Of course.
Full
well,
colour.
No. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. We're not going to that sort of expense. What the hell are you talking about? So we've got it all here. Oh, we've got a bit of colour. We've got Alison Moyer here and Spandau Ballet. And David Bowie, and so it was a huge event. When was it? 85, yes. Yeah. So it was a huge event that weirdly, I was 10, and I don't really recall it. Not really.
See, because I'm a little tiny bit older than you, I do remember
36,
being glued to the TV all day. And it was a big technological thing as well, because it was going on in two places at once. And back in those days, they if something was live from the other side of the world, they would always say live by satellite.
Yes,
satellite was a big. It was. Satellites were like huge.
Well, there was only two up there.
Tracks,
then,
weren't they? They had huge trucks with dishes the size of spaceships up there. Yeah. And it was amazing that something was coming from the other side of the world. They couldn't quite manage to do that when it came to the letting us know who shot JR in Dallas. They couldn't quite beam that across. But for Live Aid, we were all good.
Yeah, and it was sort of weirdly, this iconic image of Freddie Mercury became the symbol of it, really, didn't it? He stole the show, really,
definitely.
Didn't he? And obviously at the time we didn't know, but another disaster of the 80s with AIDS, so he was on his way out, unfortunately, or certainly around that sort of time. But it was the famine and the Africa. It was the start of everything. Comic relief off of the back of it. It was that sort of awareness. We all became aware of it, and so many different charities sort of started focusing their attention on it, which I guess is a great thing, really, raising awareness.
I think so. It must be so difficult now, though, for charities to raise money, because we've seen it. We have seen it all now. We are very, we've got charity fatigue, almost. And if you ever watch any daytime TV, and having been recently unemployed, I've watched a lot of daytime TV. TV. There are so many charities, whether it's donkeys, dogs, cats, old people, children, whatever. Yeah. Everybody wants a little bit of money, but you can't compete with what Live Aid was doing.
No, and they did all sorts of things for charity, didn't they, raising money, like telethon appeals and stuff. That was a yearly thing, wasn't it, as well as Comic Relief? They built
Blue Peter had their Totalizer Tower thing, didn't they? Do you remember that? Yeah.
And it all seemed to be focused on Africa, thanks to Bob Geldof.
Yeah.
It was all helping, the famine and the kids and the adopted kid, which doesn't seem right these days. But, I mean, Madonna loved it, didn't she?
Yeah.
So she got really involved. Some would say too much. But, and Angelina Jolie.
Where are those kids now, and how old will those kids be? Has anybody ever checked to see what's happened to those kids that were adopted back in the 80s?
I'd like to think they've gone back and done thanks for the money, Madonna, but I'm going to go and enjoy myself properly now. But I don't know. I would think I don't mean in a Suella Braverman way. I mean they've gone back as in go back to the families, and they can go and spread their wealth, and they can go and do stuff with their communities and things. Because I think that's what Madonna and people like that who decided to go. I mean, obviously a lot of famous people went over. I don't think they do that anymore. It was a bit of a standing in a.
You go with like the shopping list of children. You say, "I want that one, that one, that one," wouldn't you? And you
no, but I meant during the charity. I meant for Live Aid. They didn't go over and do some pick and mix.
They did pick children as well, though, wouldn't they? They bring some kids home. These are the photogenic children. We'll take these ones home as well. It's almost as if they were doing it for the publicity rather than for altruistic reasons.
But they don't. When they do not Live Aid, but Comic Relief, they've stopped sending famous people over. I think now, because it was a little bit patronising, wasn't it? It's like, let's go and kneel down in a mud hut and have a look at how much of a struggle you've got. I'm just going to get back in the Jeep to the 5-star hotel, and I'll see you tomorrow for another little chat. It doesn't really work. But it was a great start to helping raise our awareness, helping us realise that we were very, very, very lucky.
Yes.
Even though Halley's Comet was going to plummet into the earth any minute now. As a kid, I was so scared when all the press came out about Halley's Comet.
And there was a lot of things about space, but there were a few satellites up in the air, and there was always a scare that one of them was going to come crashing to Earth.
Oh, without doubt.
If it wasn't a comet, it would be a satellite, probably a Chinese satellite, or a Russian. It was always the Russian satellites at the time.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been one of ours.
No, definitely
no chance. Ours are reliable.
But no. So as we were saying, there was a lot of man-made disasters with the shuttle, and with the ferries and things like that.
Yes,
Chernobyl, yes, as well.
I mean, that was pretty man-made.
Yes.
I remember the news saying we've got acid rain coming from Chernobyl, and I was like, shit myself from the station to school. It's raining. Gah! Put my hood up in case it might help. And you were scared beyond belief that the Chernobyl you had no idea in your head where Russia was, but the rains were coming from Chernobyl, and we were all going to be melting on the streets.
Yeah, and it was going to get into the grass.
Yeah,
I remember this. So the grass was going to get into the cattle.
Yeah,
and the cattle was then it was going to get into the milk.
Oh yeah,
and did they stop doing milk for a while?
Well, they must have done.
I think they must have done, mustn't they?
They're going to be having 3-headed cows in Sussex. Because of the rain. I don't know. There was such misinformation, wasn't there? And like the jokes that spread somehow, this misinformation just spread so badly and so wildly across the country. When anything happened, it was just made things so much scarier. Because it was all exaggerated, everything that you heard from Chinese whispers.
But the thing was, the people you saw on TV would have been genuine experts, wouldn't they? So you could get your back then. You could get your proper news on the TV because they would have scientists in who had actually been to university, who'd actually done all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Whereas now they just have some internet expert comes in.
TikTok
like COVID was the thing, wasn't it? Everybody was kind of like we said earlier on. Trump was coming up with his drink bleach cures for that. Everybody now has a way to cure all ills and problems of the world.
But anybody also with the right little soundbite has a platform. That's the worry, is that back then you get a platform once you've earned it, really. You earn the platform by having your letters after your name, and someone invites you on to one of the four channels.
Yeah.
But now, you say something enough that gets a trigger enough, 60 billion squillion people view it, and that's truth.
Yeah, and then they get you in on Good Morning Britain the next morning, and that's it. You're all over the mainstream media as well. God's sake. Yes,
exactly. So, you could have... Everybody's an expert these days.
Everybody is, indeed.
Including us.
Indeed. Look at us here. We got letters after our name, but we've still got our platform, haven't we?
I get a lot of letters written to me.
I think after today's episode, I think there will be, thank goodness, that there's no official complaint line, James.
Well, I think it makes us realise, doing something like this makes us realise that even though we're permanently connected into the news feeds, there are not the same amount of disasters as we were exposed to in the 80s. And I don't know why. Don't get me wrong, a lot of bad stuff happening, but not to the point that we had between those lovely 10 years between the 80 and 90.
Yeah.
Seems to be just prolific amount of disasters.
You were talking about misinformation when it came to disasters as well. Do you remember when this happened?
Good afternoon to you. Earlier on today, apparently a woman rang the BBC and said she heard that there was a hurricane on the way. Well, if you're watching, don't worry, there isn't.
The end of his career.
That's the thing and he's still going. He's still got his own little internet weather forecasting channel that he does. But that is the clip that sadly has haunted Michael Fish since forever.
Yeah.
Because he said, don't worry, it might be a bit windy, no problem. The next morning, we just woke up to there were trees down, roofs had blown off, and that was 1987.
Yeah, I remember it well. I was about 12, and I still went to school. That morning, school was open, and you went. Sorry, we went down the road, saw a few trees down, went on the motorway, no trees down, obviously. Into Portsmouth, didn't see any trees down, a few roofs, a few bins over, stuff like that. But didn't realise that obviously not a huge amount of trees right down on the south coast, but a little bit inland, been flattened. And it was bad, but the weather. I mean, crikey. I think we had power cuts every fourth day in the 80s, didn't we? Due to a bit windy. A little bit windy. Gone. And we all had candles back in the 80s in our houses.
You always
not
did.
Decoratively.
Yeah. You always had spare candles.
This was a Yankee candle,
I think it was, it was just your plain
functioning.
I think this was probably our parents coming off the back of the 70s when there was, there would be time switch offs. And I can remember that from back in the 70s. We got very excited about a power cut. But I think the hangover from that was in our parents' mentality that you've always got to have a little stash of candles just in case it happens. It turns out they were right, though. After the hurricane, those candles came in very handy.
Well, they only had to blow in the wrong direction and the pylon got detached. But I had a candle holder and a candle on my shelf in the 80s, throughout the 80s. And we didn't light them and go, oh, but a bit of ambiance, this is nice. It's so I could see the way to the bloody fuse box. Do you know what I mean? Your mum's holding the candle by the fuse box and get the fucking flame away. But it's, so it was a necessity.
Yeah.
And things like the storm of 87, where what's his face from Hello get a tree through his head. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Oh, and he survived it.
Yes.
But so things like that, where, we were so naive in our thinking. Things like this were just huge, mind-blowing situations. And as you touched on earlier, now we're connected all the time to all this social media. We're almost numb to disasters. The things that happen, we see them. They might not happen in this country. They're happening all over the world, and we can see it whenever we want and accidentally see it on our feeds, all these disaster things happening. So if anything like that happens in this country, we're like, oh... it's like kids who watch horror films and they're 8 years old now. I mean, God, I remember watching Nightmare on Elm Street and I was about 13. I didn't fucking sleep for about a year. And now kids will be like, because it's not actually that scary when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, it is, but it's because it's in your dreams and that's what it's meant to be about. So it freaks you out a bit. But they're numb to it more than we were. We were so innocent, I think.
Yeah.
So we'd see things like a starving child in Africa and go, be like, oh my God. And now obviously kids see all that sort of stuff all the time on their feeds.
And when it's on the TV as well, for the charity adverts. You never see a starving kid in real time motion. They're always in slow motion.
Yeah,
or the donkey
Yeah.
is always it will blink its eyes very slowly because they've slowed it down.
That's right. And they always tell you how far they've got to walk to get water, which is valid. And so I say to my boys when they complain that they've got to reset the broadband router for the third time, I say Louis has to walk 4 meters every evening to reset the broadband router. If you can donate £35 a month, he can get super fast fibre optic broadband. Donate now if you can. And my boys are like, shut up. Dad. Shut up.
Oh my
They
God.
don't know, do they? They don't know they're born. How old do we sound?
It's different though, isn't it? That now, like one of major problems now would not have even figured, been on the radar.
No.
Obviously, there was no modem to reset or anything like that. But it was, I think we have a different kind of expectation of how things need to be for our convenience now, don't we? Because it is a big deal to have to physically switch off the router.
Bend down.
Bend down. And it's always behind something, isn't it? It's never easy.
You move it and a broom falls over, twats you on the head, it knocks the printer, the paper falls out. It's never easy. And why do we have to have that? Why do we have to have a modem router thing? You know what I mean? Just make it
happen. Make it happen.
For God's sake.
That's all.
So lots of we've just got to appreciate now how much we've got now compared to back then. My goodness.
What a positive way to finish this episode of the Bring Back the 80s podcast as we will come back in a week with part 2 of this. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, listening. If you have liked it, share it with one other person, as we always say, and let us know. James, what are you up to in the interim?
Oh, I don't know. Just trying to avoid disasters. Usually involves spilling food down myself, putting my back in when I reset the modem, and looking up in the sky, making sure nothing's going to fall out of it.
That's the way it is. If you want to catch me in the interim, AndyJackson'sEveningShow.com.
I've heard it's going really well.
It's a brand new thing.
That's a good thing.
I've cut out the middle, man.
Good.
Because the only person who can sack me now is myself.
Yeah, I heard you got a really good boss.
I got a brilliant boss.
It's very easy going.
I can have all the time off I want. So if you want to catch me on that, it's a nightly live thing.
Is your modem okay?
Modem's okay. I always switch it on and off before we go on, just in case.
That's the best tech advice I could give you.
But there we go. So that's in the meantime. But we'll be back again in another week with another Bring Back the 80s podcast.
What's it about next week?
Next week is all about disasters again.
That is disastrous.
Until next time, we will see you next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition. We'd love it if you could subscribe in your favourite podcast app. And don't forget, there's a video version on YouTube too. You can contact us using the links in the show notes and on the YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time for another edition of Bring Back the 80s.